this wide angle picture.
I look disgusting. That's not what I look like.
Yeah, it's not what you look like. That's the thing. That's why it's not a good portrait lens. That's the point of this video. What's going on, guys? It's Matt Jacobs here. I usually do music related content on here, but I want to lean more into photo video related content because that's something I'm very passionate about. So this is my attempt at that because I did a video. I got a second X-T3 here. I'm shooting on my first X-T3, my silver one, and I got this black one. And I did a video on it. It's one of my best performing videos on this channel. So we're gonna try leaning in that direction a little bit more. And I wanna talk specifically today about focal lengths and why they're important for photography and videography. And just, you know, why have multiple lenses? It's something I didn't understand going into using cameras a lot, you know, for the first time. But I just didn't understand at first, like, why not just get one lens, and then if you want your subject to be bigger in the frame, you get closer, and if you want them to be smaller in the frame, you step back. I just didn't understand, like, and also I thought always, why wouldn't you get a zoom lens? Because you have so much versatility. And there's just so much to talk about when it comes to this topic. Like, the reason that you get different lenses is because even if you have two lenses at a similar focal length, you might get one that because it shines in a different area. For example, I got this, I'm going to talk about all these cameras and stuff here sometime soon, but I got this Fujifilm XM1, this tiny little guy, and I have a pancake lens on here. This is a 27mm pancake lens. The lens I'm shooting on right now is a 23mm f2 prime lens. These are both prime lenses, they're not zooms. And like I said, I didn't understand why not always get a zoom. It's because primes are sharper and there's a reason you get primes. Maybe that's a separate topic. Anyway, my point on this tangent is you might get, you know, 27mm pancake lens because of its size, but the 23mm f2 prime, even though it's very close focal length, because even though it's a little bit bigger, it has better autofocus, and I can rely on this when it comes to videos and I sit down and talking to the camera. Video like this. I think the easiest way to get someone to understand why differing focal lengths are important is just showing you the same subject taken with different focal lengths. So I have an example here taken with, and I'll put the focal length. This was done with my zoom lens here. I work at a car dealership and I do videos of cars and I take pictures of them as well. So the easiest way I did this test was I took this zoom lens. It has different focal lengths on here. It has 55, 35, 23, and 18. So I took a picture of the same truck at these different focal lengths, keeping the truck the same size in the frame. And you'll see as the focal length changes, the same subject can look vastly different just because your lens is different and how that focal length perceives the world, basically. The 35mm focal length full frame equivalent is like what the human eye sees. Is about the same if you are looking at an area and you hold up a camera to your eye with a 35mm lens full frame equivalent, it'll look about the same. So that's kind of the anchor point of understanding focal lengths, in my opinion. I'm gonna talk about this a little bit differently. If you're new and these numbers are really arbitrary, it's more about the effect that you get that's more important. But I'm using ASPC cameras, a Fuji X lineup. So it's a little bit different. A 23mm lens that I'm shooting on now would be like a full frame 35. But just to keep it less confusing, I'm just gonna talk about what the focal lengths are on ASPC. So a 23mm lens would be like what your eye sees. I have a 12mm wide angle lens to get a different perspective. And I also have a 56mm Viltrox lens, which is a better portrait lens. And it's a little bit more of a telephoto lens, so it reaches out there a bit more. So different focal lengths will specialize in taking different kinds of pictures. A wide angle lens might be better for architecture or landscapes, or maybe inside of tight areas. Like I take pictures inside of cars at my car dealership job with a wide angle lens. As you start to get wider than the 23mm ASPC focal length, you start to introduce warping and distortion as you get wider and wider. So I don't have that many super wide angle lenses, but I do notice with my 12mm, it's not the most flattering portrait lens because of the way it distorts as you get to the outer edges of the frame. If somebody's head, for example, is in the outer limit of the frame of a wide angle lens shot, their head will be like pulled up toward the corner. It's a weird thing. So wide angles are generally not good for portraits for that reason. Generally, portraits are good starting at the 23mm focal length. If you're keeping it out a little bit more, and then the 56 might be good for headshots, and even more than that. Which kind of brings me to my next point of, why the different focal lengths are important, is because as you get a higher number of focal lengths, like 56, will have more what's called compression than my 23mm lens. So compression gets introduced because your subject is farther away and your lens reaches out more. I don't really know the technicality of it, but compression adds basically more separation from your background. So you will definitely notice with, versus a 12mm lens, the 56mm lens, if you take a portrait, that's why it's a good portrait lens, you can really separate your subject from your background, really have that blurry background. That's because of compression. It's also because of aperture, but that's kind of a different subject as well, as I said about something else earlier. I tend to go on tangents in case you didn't notice. So I hope I was able to edit this into a more concise and helpful nugget of knowledge for anybody who might be looking into this subject. But I want to go to a section here next where I will get one of my friends to be my subject. I'm going to do kind of a similar thing with the truck example I showed you, but show you the proof in the pudding why different focal lengths are better for portraits, and you can see for yourself what makes it better versus, basically I'm going to show you why the 56 and the 23mm lenses that I have are better for portraiture than the 12mm lens. So I recorded a video section for this segment, but I didn't like how the audio sounded, and I also didn't like the shot because I forgot my monitor, so I'm just going to do a quick voiceover here. So first we had the 12mm focal length. This is a third party, it's called a per gear lens. I would consider this not a flattering portrait. Especially if you're taking a wide angle shot, I wouldn't get so close with the subject, but the whole idea with this test was to keep him the same size in the frame throughout the focal length so you could really see how they change the perspective. So yeah, you can see the bokeh in the background is not that pleasing. You generally would stop down a wide angle lens to keep everything in focus, and you wouldn't use it for portraits in the first place. Next we have the 18mm focal length. It's already getting more flattering, although this wouldn't be a good portrait lens in my opinion this close up. It would be more like a full body shot, getting more environment, but you can see the difference between this and the 12mm in that the trees are getting closer to the camera, it seems, even though I actually had to take a step back to keep him the same size in frame again because the focal length got longer. Next is the 23mm focal length. I shot all of these pictures at an aperture of f2.8 to keep some consistency, but you can see more blur coming into the background because as your focal length goes up, you get more compression. It's not like you magically get compression at a 56mm lens. You get gradually more going up in focal length. I would consider this a good portrait lens. I would take a step back and maybe have, not so close to him, but this is definitely more flattering than the wide angle lenses, that's for sure. Then I had the 27mm pancake, again at f2.8, that's wide open for this lens. Even slightly more background. This is really close to the 18, 23, and 27 are all kind of similar focal lengths. It's kind of gradual here, but I'll show you the stark difference at the end between the two extremes. But again, now the trees are completely gone. They were still in the 23mm lens a little bit, but yeah, you can see the background getting more compression, a nicer separation for the subject. And then finally the 56mm focal length. This is actually where it would shine as a headshot. This, keeping the subject this big in the frame. Like I said, they kept the aperture the same, so there should be if it was just based on aperture, the same amount of background blur. So any extra black background blur between this and the earlier pictures, which there's a lot more in this one, is all because of the compression of the focal length. This is a side-by-side of the 56 and 12mm lens. It was kind of gradual going up to this focal length, but you can really see the extreme difference when you compare them side by side. Thank you so much for watching this video. I ended up spending a lot more time on it than I expected, but I hope it was worth it. I hope it taught you something if you're a beginner, or at least it was entertaining, or you could appreciate the work that I put into it, or any of that, all of the above. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. Leave a comment down below. Leave me a suggestion. I do want to start making more of this kind of content, and your feedback would be much appreciated. Thanks for watching. Bye.